Today, we are wrapping up our series on parenting. And this is only a 3-week series because I figure parenting's pretty simple and straightforward. And, it would probably take, a few weeks just to deal with all the issues related to parenting. No, I think dealing with all the issues related to parenting would take a lifetime. It would be a lifetime series. And once again, I recognize that many of us in this room are not parents. My hope is that what I say today will apply to you as you support parents, as you may become a parent later on. I think the ideas, the teaching we're going to look at today, I think is really important. And today, I want to invite parents to simply ask this question: what can I do to strengthen my relationship with my son or daughter? What can I do to strengthen that relationship? And I realize in looking at just even the parents that are here today, that we are in a lot of different stages of life, right? We have parents who maybe have kids that are 1 or 2. We have parents that, I know I was talking to Natalie yesterday, her daughter is 70. Right? So we've got parents that kind of span the generations and the stages of life. So whatever stage you're in, whatever stage your kids are in, I want to invite you to ask, what can I do to enhance my relationship with my child? And my hope in having you ask that question is to motivate you to engage, continue to engage, re-engage in that relationship with your kids. And I want to do so by laying out some principles and insights from Pastor Andy Stanley, who is really just an expert in the field of youth ministry in particular. And in this message, I want to pass on some of what I've learned from him. As Andy Stanley puts it, here's why it's so important to strengthen your relationship with your children. Because when it matters most, the quality of your relationship with your children will determine the weight of your influence. The quality of your relationship will determine the weight of your influence. We know this from experience, right? I mean, let's consider 2 dads, just as an example. Let's take a dad who has no relationship with his son or daughter, just not present at all in their life. Let's say the daughter becomes a teenager and this dad starts calling her up and giving her advice. How's that going to go? Right? It is going to go absolutely nowhere. That dad has no relationship with his daughter, and so he will have no influence in her life. Now, I want to compare that to the dad of a friend of mine. And this friend and I were talking about a month ago, and he was kind of wrestling with how to respond to something going on, a dynamic in his marriage. And his wife has a hobby and a side job, and he's not really thrilled about it, but he wants to support her, and he's like, I'm not sure what to do. And so he was asking for my advice, and he's my age, late 40s. And when we were talking, he said, I really trust my dad. I really value his take on things, and so I asked him, and here's what he said, and I think he's exactly right. And that struck me. I thought, right? Here's a man in his late 40s, and he still sees his dad as a source of valuable input in his life. His dad has influence in his life. Why is that? Because he has a healthy and strong relationship with his dad. The quality of our relationship will determine the weight of our influence. Now, you may hear this principle and think, well, of course, we all know that. Don't need to get a sermon to hear that. Right? And that's kind of obvious, we may think. But in reality, I think a lot of parents struggle with this principle. And here's why. When we first become parents, our influence doesn't hinge on relationship. When we first become parents, when we are parenting young children, what does our influence hinge on? It hinges on our size and position advantage, right? Right? Well, I'm dad and I'm bigger, and you'll do what I say. I'm mom and I'm bigger, and you'll do what I say. I can buckle you in your car seat. Right? My mom can't do that with me now. It doesn't work, right? I can give you a timeout. I can force you to brush your teeth. I can make you do what I want you to do because of my size and position advantage. But here's the key. Eventually, that size and position advantage goes away. That's a critical transition period that takes place middle school, high school, maybe even some beyond that. But there's that critical transition when our size and position advantage goes away. And once that advantage goes away, the only source of our influence is our relationship. So, parents, if you have a kid in middle school or high school, I want us to really think about this, because I have a son in middle school. When our kids are in middle school and in high school, in that transition period, the wisest thing we can do as parents is to switch how we influence. To stop influencing by size and position and start influencing solely by our relationship. Now, once again, my older son Micah, he's 13, a teenager now. And there will come a point where simply saying, I'm dad and I'm bigger, so you have to do what I say, will come to an end. And the sooner I can make that transition, the better. Now, as Andy Stanley points out, some parents hear this and say, well, that won't work. Anyone think that? Okay? He's done youth ministry, right, for years, so he's worked with hundreds, literally thousands of parents and their youth. So there are parents that will come up to him and say, that won't work. And he says, well, what do you mean it won't work? And they'll say, well, if I try that approach of parenting from relational influence as soon as possible, I won't be able to get my kids to do what I want them to do. And Andy Stanley responds, exactly, and that's okay. Because getting my kids to do what I want them to do isn't the goal anymore. The goal is to maintain the relationship so that I can maintain the influence. I see this going back to my friend, who's once again my age and made that comment about his dad. Because this friend of mine has two sons in high school. One's a senior to be in a junior. And just a few weeks ago, he was saying, wow, this is like uncharted territory. Like, I'm just not sure how to handle some of what my sons are wanting to do and what I want them to do and how to navigate that. And I'm really not sure. And he said, I kind of want more control. I kind of want, you'll do this, you're going to do this. But I think back to my dad, and my dad kind of gave me that freedom. My dad kind of let go in a way. And I look back at some of the things I did in high school, and I go, that probably wasn't the best. But then I see my other friends who had that control, and they went off to college and just went crazy. And he said, I think there was something about my dad's approach that was really smart. Now, he didn't use these words, but in essence what he was saying is, when I was in high school, my dad made that transition from size and position to relational influence. And what struck me is, for that dad, that move has paid off, right? 20, 30 years later, that move has paid off in the influence and the relationship that he still has with his son. So, what happens if we don't switch to relational influence? What happens if we cling to size and position influence? Parents would never be tempted to do that, right? Parents would never be tempted to cling to the size and position advantage even long after it's effective. No. But what happens, let's just say, hypothetically, what happens if we push the size and position button after it's effective? This is key. What happens is that we erode the one thing that's most important. We erode our relationship with our children. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen someone push the size and position button too long and it just takes a toll on the relationship with their son or daughter? Mom and dad control their children using their size and position long after it's effective. You know, well, if you want the car, you're going to do this. And if you want me to pay for college, you're going to do this. And you're going to take this path. And you're going to do this because I want you to do this. And then the child may rebel, or in fact, the child may do exactly what their parents want. But all along the way, they grow more distant from their parents. When we push the size and position button too much too long, we erode the relationship. When we push the size and position button too much too long, we exasperate our children. Now, in today's rather lengthy scripture reading, the Apostle Paul addresses fathers, but his words certainly apply to mothers and fathers alike. It's a one verse is all. But Paul says this, fathers, mothers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And last week we looked at the training and instruction of the Lord, focusing on that relationship. But Paul says, do not exasperate your children. Parents, have you ever exasperated your children? Okay, only 7 of you. That's incredible. So, other translations say, parents, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. So, to exasperate your children, one way to think about this, to exasperate your children is to abuse your size and position. And to do so in such a way that frustrates, angers your kids. To exasperate your children is to always win, to always be right. You ever seen that in a parent? Where in that dynamic where the kids, they always win, they're always right, and the kids just end up so frustrated? To exasperate your children is to yell at them just because you can. It's to get them to do what you want just because you can. And here's the thing, when we exasperate our children, we erode our relationship with them. So Paul says, instead of doing that, here's what I want you to do. Bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Now that phrase, bring them up, that's one word in Greek. It means to nourish. It means to replenish, to build up. It's used elsewhere in the New Testament to describe how God nourishes the church. See, it's not about forcing someone to do something you want. It's about developing a person. It's a relationally rich word. It's about being a nourisher, a nurturer, a replenisher. It's about speaking into it and guiding our children. And that takes relationship. The quality of our relationship determines the weight of our influence. So once again, if you are a parent here this morning, I want to encourage you to ask, what can I do to enhance my relationship with my son or daughter? Now, here's another reason why this principle, this idea is so important. When do your kids need your influence the most? I mean, they need it probably in a lot of times. But I think most of us, we would agree that the main time our kids need our influence is when they're making the decisions, the most important decisions in their life. Don't we want influence in their life when they're making the most important decisions? Don't we want influence in their life when they're deciding who to date? Or deciding, where to go to school, or what to do for a job, or who to marry, or what to study, or where to live, or how to raise their kids? See, these are important decisions that have such impact on the rest of their life. And here's the thing. about all of these decisions. By the time all of these decisions come about, size and position no longer matter. What matters is the quality of our relationship with our kids. The quality of your relationship determines the weight of your influence. So what does it take to have a great relationship with our kids? Many of you could probably share more about that than I know. I want to share a couple ideas. One is it takes true acceptance. It's really hard to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't accept us genuinely, unconditionally, deeply. Sometimes as parents we struggle with that. It takes true, deep acceptance, unconditional acceptance, and it takes time. There's a time component to any relationship. And not just quality time, I like to say that, but there has to be a certain amount of quantity of quality time. Acceptance and time. You know, as far as the time, I really have been struck this summer with just that idea of the power of what's on your calendar. That putting something on your calendar really can make a difference. And I see this in my own life, and I just wanted to share this one example because going into the summer, so we have a 13 and a 10-year-old. We had no summer camps, no nothing. So when we weren't traveling, it's like, okay, you're home all day. So I told our 10 and 13-year-olds, you're going to come up with your own schedule. It's a Monday through Thursday because Friday's my day off. It's going to be 8 to 5. There's 4 categories: heart, soul, strength, and mind. Kind of laid out what that means. What is it? You know, the strength, physically, things you want to do, play tennis. Soul, prayer, Bible study, that kind of thing. Mind, what are the subjects you might want to study? Heart, what are the things are things you just love to do? And so I had both of them come up with a schedule from 8 to 5 in half-hour increments of what they would do. And they did it. And I was like, it's one thing to put on paper, the hard part is living it, right? But it was great to see them actually come up with this schedule. And they both put things in the soul category, like Bible study, which you would think as a pastor, maybe my wife and I would consistently have Bible study with our kids. We don't. We were always, we should do that more, we should do that more. And so, and we had an earlier event with the youth group where a bunch of people were like, what's the Sermon on the Mount? I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, my kids, I'm a pastor, they don't know what the Sermon on the Mount is. That's a problem. So I said, we're going to study the Sermon on the Mount, which is the primary teaching that Jesus gives out of the Gospel of Matthew. And so we decided, I said, we're going to do this with the Message translation, which is this modern translation. But we were just on and off all summer. And then this last week, I was like, okay, it is in my calendar at lunchtime. Every day I'm going home and we're doing this Bible study. And I don't know what they thought. I don't know if you want to ask them. But I loved it. That was one of the highlights of my summer, was doing this Bible study with Micah and Daniel. Micah was like, oh, we're going to study murder. Adultery. That was interesting. We're going to look at saying, you're stupid to your brother. What you say. We're going to look at what does it mean, to worship God. What does it mean? How do you pray? I was like, the stuff in the Sermon on the Mount is so relevant to life. And just discussing that and having that time to explore some of this was a valuable time, I think, for us to connect. And it happened because it was on the calendar. So acceptance and time, those are key ingredients to deepening, to strengthening that relationship with our kids. So I want to close this morning by saying this. Maybe you're hearing this message and you're thinking, wish I'd heard that 10 years ago. Wish I'd heard that 20 years ago. Maybe it's too late. Maybe for some of you, you are asking, how do I reconnect relationally with my kids? How do I get back in? Because right now there's some serious distance. And there's no guarantee for getting back in, right? Because ultimately that's up to the kids as far as maybe not reconnecting at a relational level. But I want to just point out what Andy Stanley suggests, and I think there's some wisdom in this. He says our best bet for rebuilding a relationship is to serve your way back in. Your best bet for rebuilding a relationship is to serve your way back in. And see, that's true because it's difficult to keep the door of a relationship closed on someone who consistently serves us. It's hard to keep that door of relationship closed on someone who consistently serves us, not because they want something from us, but because they want to give to us and they want to bless us. So your best bet for reconnecting is to serve your way back in. Your best bet is to follow the example of Jesus Christ. As Scripture tells us, Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. And He did so in the ultimate way, laying down His life for us so that we may live.